Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett's long-awaited investiture ceremony on Friday. She'll take her seat on the bench tomorrow alongside most of her colleagues for the resumption of in-person oral arguments at the Supreme Court. But with Justice Brett Kavanaugh joining remotely after testing positive for COVID-19, the term is already proving to be one of the most unpredictable and consequential in decades. Our Devin Dwyer takes a closer look.
In rare rapid succession, the justices have been disavowing politics.
I think the court was thought to be the least dangerous branch, and we may have become the most dangerous.
The Supreme Court on a PR offensive.
We don't trade votes, and members of the court have different judicial philosophies.
Justice Amy Coney Barrett in a speech along Mitch McConnell insisting the court is not comprised of a bunch of partisan hacks. The blitz a sign of growing concern about the court's credibility.
Not since Bush against Gore has the public perception of the court's legitimacy seemed so seriously threatened.
Public approval of the Supreme Court has hit its lowest level in more than 2 decades, down 18 points from last year, sinking 9 points just since July. The court's 5-4 midnight decision in September to allow that Texas ban on nearly all abortions, only adding to public controversy.
Roe v. Wade is on thin ice. At the moment, it really feels more as if it's a question of when, not if, and how, not whether.
In a major case out of Mississippi this fall, the justices will decide whether to overturn nearly 50 years of abortion rights precedent. They'll hear cases on the death penalty, separation of church and state, and a major Second Amendment case that could establish a right to carry a handgun outside the home.
It would mean that you could expect more people to be carrying handguns in places like New York City, Boston, and Los Angeles.
The blockbuster cases playing out before the most conservative court in a generation. A 538 analysis found Justice Sonia Sotomayor is now the most liberal justice. Clarence Thomas remains the most conservative. But no longer is there one justice in the middle. There are 3, all conservatives, Chief Justice John Roberts and Trump appointees Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett.
Barrett, for example, voted with Roberts and Kavanaugh over 90% of the time. She seems like she's going to be a core component of the conservative triad at the center of the court.
Democrats had sounded the alarm about Barrett.
A judicial torpedo they are firing at the ACA.
But she has so far defied expectations of both sides.
The expectation that Justice Barrett would be a reliable vote for the most doctrinaire originalist position has not materialized.
Brett Kavanaugh, the justice in the majority more than any other last term, is also a critical vote to watch.
We don't know what a Brett Kavanaugh, who is no longer beholden to John Roberts to get the deciding vote, will say about abortion. And we don't know the same about Justice Barrett.
Barrett and Kavanaugh broke with the Chief Justice to allow that Texas abortion law to go ahead on technical grounds, a sign John Roberts' once dominant influence may be coming to an end.
Whenever it's possible to find a narrow technical solution to a case, Chief Justice Roberts will encourage his colleagues to do it. Not all of them are on board with that.
A court at a crossroads as Americans remain on edge over just how far and how fast the Supreme Court will go.
Our thanks to Devin Dwyer for that.
Once the FDA approves the vaccination in different cohorts, starting with 12 and above, grades 7 to 12, we will begin to apply that requirement in the next term.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, fresh off defeating a recall effort against him, announcing the nation's first COVID vaccine mandate for school children. It comes as the nation passes the once unthinkable milestone of 700,000 lives lost due to the pandemic. Dr. Anthony Fauci joins us now. Dr. Fauci, thank you for being here. I want to start with that number, that just almost incomprehensible number, 700,000 people who have died just in the United States from the pandemic. How did we get here? Did so many have to die?
Well, this is the most formidable virus, John. It is really, you know, from the very beginning has evolved to the point where we're now dealing with this Delta variant, which is an extraordinary virus in the sense, the same virus is still SARS-CoV-2, except that it has a capability of transmitting extraordinarily efficiency. There are certain elements about this that were just unavoidable in the sense that there are going to be deaths, there are going to be a lot of infections globally, no matter what anyone did. But there were situations where we could have done better and we can do better. And I think we're living through that right now, John, because we now have, within our capability, highly effective and safe vaccines. And although we've done well in the sense that we now have 55% of the population fully vaccinated, 64% having received at least one dose, but there are 70 million people who are eligible to be vaccinated who have not gotten vaccinated. So when you say, are some of those deaths avoidable? They certainly are. In fact, looking forward now, most of the deaths could be avoidable if we get people vaccinated, because if you look at the people who get hospitalized and the people who die, it is overwhelmingly weighted towards the people who are unvaccinated. So where we are right now, many of these could be avoidable.
We also have this breakthrough, apparent breakthrough that Merck announced, this new treatment that seems to be able to cut down hospitalizations and severe illness in half. How big a deal is this new treatment?
It's a big deal, John. I mean, you have now a small molecule, a drug that can be given orally, and the results of the trial that were just announced yesterday and the day before are really quite impressive. I mean, if you do a statistical significant analysis on it, it's very, very significant, cutting the deaths and hospitalization by 50%. Importantly, in the placebo versus the drug group, in the drug group, there were 0 deaths. In the placebo group, there were 8 deaths. So that is, no matter how you slice that, that's impressive. So we're really looking forward to the implementation of this.
And is that potentially something that would make the vaccine not necessary?
Oh, absolutely not. That's such a false narrative. If someone says, well, now you have a drug. Remember, the easiest way to stay out of the hospital and not die is don't get infected.
Don't
you
get
have
sick
a drug
in the first
that's
place.
very good, but
yeah.
Exactly. I mean, this idea about we have a drug, don't get vaccinated, just doesn't make any sense.
And let me ask you about this new announcement from Governor Newsom in California, a mandate for students, all eligible students, to get the vaccine. And there's no out here. He's not allowing testing as an alternative. Do you favor that, or should testing be an alternative for those that don't want their kids to take this vaccine?
John, I have been and I still am in favor of these kinds of mandates. You can make some exceptions to them, but in general, people look at this like this is something novel and new, when in fact, throughout, years and years, decades, we have made it a requirement for children to get into schools to get different types of vaccines, measles, mumps, rubella, and others. So when people treat this as something novel and terrible, it isn't. A requirement for children to come to school to be vaccinated with certain vaccines is not something new. It's been around for a very long time.
What do you say to those that say, though, this is such a new vaccine that they're reluctant, they want to, for their young children, they just feel, obviously the other vaccines are required, but there have been decades of experience with those vaccines, and they're hesitant. What do you say to them? How do you reassure them?
Well, John, a couple of things. First of all, our Food and Drug Administration, before they allow something to be given to anyone, it has to be proved to be safe and effective. They are very meticulous in their examination of the data. In addition, John, this vaccine has been given to hundreds of millions of people. So when you say it's a new vaccine, well, when you have a new vaccine that's been given to 10, 15, 20, 30,000, 100,000 people, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of people throughout the world. So although it is, quote, new, there is a lot of experience with this vaccine.
All right, last question, Dr. Fauci. There has been some good news. It looks like infections are down dramatically over the last couple of weeks. Deaths are still on the rise. That's obviously a lagging indicator. Is it possible that we are finally beginning to turn the corner on this pandemic?
We certainly are turning the corner on this particular surge, John, but we have experience over now close to 20 months of surges that go up and then come down and then go back up again. The way to keep it down, to make that turnaround continue to go down, is to do what we mentioned. Get people vaccinated. When you have 70 million people in the country who are eligible to be vaccinated, who are not yet vaccinated, that's the danger zone right there. So it's within our capability to make sure that that turnaround that we're seeing, that very favorable and optimistic turnaround, continues to go down and doesn't do what we've seen multiple times before, where it goes down and then it comes back up. We can do that merely by getting vaccinated.
All right, Dr. Fauci, thank you for joining us. Joining me now, the senator in the middle of it all, budget chairman in the Senate, Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, thank you for joining us. The bottom line, where do things stand now?
Well, I think we're going to make real progress, and I think, Jonathan, we're going to do what the American people want us to do. And the American people are very clear. They want to substantially lower the cost of prescription drugs. They want to expand home health care so that people are not forced out of their homes into nursing homes. They want to expand Medicare so that elderly people can have dental care, can have hearing aids, can have eyeglasses. They want us to address the existential threat of climate change. And I'll tell you what else they want. They are sick and tired of the rich getting richer and not paying their fair share of taxes. And they want this reconciliation bill to be paid for by doing away with the loopholes that the wealthy and large corporations enjoy. So we have the American people very, very strongly on our side. We've got the President of the United States on our side. We've got 96% of the members of the Democratic caucus in the House on our side. We got all but 2 senators at this point and the Democratic caucus on our side. We're going to win this thing. We're going to pass a strong infrastructure bill to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, and we're going to pass a reconciliation bill.
All right, I want to get to one of those 2 senators that is not with you right now. Senator Sinema, as we heard Rachel Scott refer to, put out a lengthy statement overnight about the failure of the House to vote on that infrastructure bill. She said, in part, the failure of the U.S. House to hold a vote on Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is inexcusable and deeply disappointing for communities across our country. Denying Americans millions of good-paying jobs, safer roads, cleaner water, more reliable electricity, and better broadband only hurts everyday families. She accuses you, Senator, and other progressives of pulling off what she calls an ineffective stunt and holding that infrastructure bill hostage to the larger social infrastructure bill. Your response?
Well, I think Senator Sinema is wrong. I think from day one, Jonathan, it has been clear. President of the United States has said it. Speaker of the House Pelosi has made it clear. Our Majority Leader in the Senate, Schumer, has made it clear. Both of these bills are going forward in tandem. Going forward in tandem. We've got to pass them both. I voted for the infrastructure bill. It is an important bill. I'm a former mayor. I know how much we've got to address our crumbling infrastructure and create jobs there. But I also know that elderly people in this country cannot chew their food because they don't have teeth in their mouth. I know that the American people are sick and tired of paying 10 times more for prescription drugs than the people of Canada and in other countries. I know that there are young people out there who would love the opportunity to get a higher education but can't afford community college. We're going to make 2 years of community college tuition free. And I also know that the scientists are telling us that if we do not act boldly in terms of cutting carbon emissions, that the planet we're leaving our kids and grandchildren will be increasingly uninhabitable. And let me also say this, Jonathan. We're not just taking on or dealing with Senators Manchin or Senator Sinema. We're taking on the entire ruling class of this country. Right now, the drug companies, the health insurance companies, the fossil fuel industry are spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to prevent us from doing what the American people want. And this really is a test of whether or not American democracy can work. The Republican Party is bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical industry. They're not going to do anything. But I hope very much, and I expect, that the Democratic caucus and the president, I know he will, stand firm and tell the drug companies, stop ripping us off. Well, tell the insurance companies that the American people need, elderly people need dental care, hearing aids and eyeglasses, people need home health care, our young people need the quality child care that they deserve.
So let me ask you about where the president is on this. As I understand it, he has now floated a $2 trillion top-line number on this broader bill. You are at 3.5. I remember you initially wanted closer to $6 trillion. Are you comfortable with the idea of cutting this down to about $2 trillion?
No, well, first of all, I'm not sure that that's accurate. As you know, there's a lot of gossip that goes on. What the president has said is that there's going to have to be some give and take, and I think that that's right. I think, if anything, Jonathan, when we especially talk about the crisis of climate change and the need to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, the $6 trillion that I originally proposed was probably too little. $3.5 trillion should be a minimum, but I accept that there's going to have to be give and take. But at the end of the day, the real
okay, so give and take, but not $2 trillion. That's not enough. Because the president also said that a smaller investment could create historic achievements. But $2 trillion is not enough.
What the president is saying is that what we are trying to do is for the working families of this country, for the children, for the elderly, we're trying to pass the most consequential piece of legislation since the Great Depression. And he's right. You know, so the bottom line is we have got to pass it. We've got to pass the infrastructure bill. And the American people are going to have to stand up. You know what bothers me about this whole thing? Poll after poll shows what we are doing is exactly what the American people want. It's not what the big money interest wants, not what the lobbyist wants. It's what the American people want. And we got to do it.
Now, Senator Manchin's the other senator in the middle of this. He's been consistent. We actually had him on this program back in July. And let me play you what he said about his top line number back then. But what's your bottom line? The question is, this is over $1 trillion.
The bottom line.
Bernie Sanders wants $6 more trillion. Here's what are you? How far are you willing to go?
I want to make sure we pay for it. I do not want to add more debt on. So if that's $1 trillion or $1.5 or $2 trillion, whatever that comes out to be over a 10-year period, that's what I would be voting for.
So, I mean, basic math tells me if you have Sinema and you have Manchin, both unwilling to go above that.
If you just listen, Jonathan, if you just listen to what Manchin said, he said he wants it to be paid for. He's right. I want it to be paid for. And in fact, that is exactly what we are going to do. And if it's $3.5 trillion, we can pay for it because, as everybody knows, you got some of the wealthiest people in this country who in a given year don't pay a penny in federal income tax. Large corporations don't pay a nickel in federal income tax. So if Manchin wants to pay for it, I'm there. Let's do it. And by the way, you could pay for it at $3.5 trillion. You could pay for it at $6 trillion. We have massive income and wealth inequality in this country. But
as you know,
we can do that.
I mean, as you know, what he's saying is the only taxes he's willing to go to would give you at most $2 trillion. We also heard.
But you see, then that's in.
I mean, that's where he is. And Terry McAuliffe, who, of course, is on the ballot running in Virginia, is saying that $3.5 trillion is simply too big. It's going to hurt Democrats. And he thinks it might even hurt him in his own race in Virginia.
Well, Terry McAuliffe, I wish Terry McAuliffe the best of luck. I hope he becomes the governor of Virginia again. But let him focus on Virginia issues. Some of us have got to deal with the national issues. And what I am telling you, ask the American people whether or not we should have Medicare negotiating prescription drug prices. Ask them. Ask whether or not we should expand home health care, whether we should make community colleges tuition-free, whether or not we should deal with climate. And when we do all of those things, by the way, we create millions of good-paying jobs. What we are fighting for is precisely what the American people want, and that's what we've got to do.
Okay, we're just about out of time. Bottom line, if Manchin and Sinema don't come up, don't do what you are suggesting, what most of the Democrats or almost all of the other Democrats want, does that mean we get nothing? No infrastructure bill? No. Nothing?
No, at the end of the day, I am absolutely convinced we're going to have a strong infrastructure bill, and we're going to have a great consequential reconciliation bill which addresses the needs of the American people.
All right, Senator Sanders, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett's long-awaited investiture ceremony on Friday. She'll take her seat on the bench tomorrow alongside most of her colleagues for the resumption of in-person oral arguments at the Supreme Court. But with Justice Brett Kavanaugh joining remotely after testing positive for COVID-19, the term is already proving to be one of the most unpredictable and consequential in decades. Our Devin Dwyer takes a closer look.
In rare rapid succession, the justices have been disavowing politics.
I think the court was thought to be the least dangerous branch, and we may have become the most dangerous.
The Supreme Court on a PR offensive.
We don't trade votes, and members of the court have different judicial philosophies.
Justice Amy Coney Barrett, in a speech along Mitch McConnell, insisting the court is not comprised of a bunch of partisan hacks. The blitz, a sign of growing concern about the court's credibility.
Not since Bush against Gore has the public perception of the court's legitimacy seemed so seriously threatened.
Public approval of the Supreme Court has hit its lowest level in more than 2 decades, down 18 points from last year, sinking 9 points just since July. The court's 5-4 midnight decision in September to allow that Texas ban on nearly all abortions, only adding to public controversy.
Roe v. Wade is on thin ice. At the moment, it really feels more as if it's a question of when, not if, and how, not whether.
In a major case out of Mississippi this fall, the justices will decide whether to overturn nearly 50 years of abortion rights precedent. They'll hear cases on the death penalty, separation of church and state, and a major Second Amendment case that could establish a right to carry a handgun outside the home.
It would mean that you could expect more people to be carrying handguns in places like New York City, Boston, and Los Angeles.
The blockbuster cases playing out before the most conservative court in a generation. A 538 analysis found Justice Sonia Sotomayor is now the most liberal justice. Clarence Thomas remains the most conservative. But no longer is there one justice in the middle. There are 3, all conservatives, Chief Justice John Roberts and Trump appointees Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett.
Barrett, for example, voted with Roberts and Kavanaugh over 90% of the time. She seems like she's going to be a core component of the conservative triad at the center of the court.
Democrats had sounded the alarm about Barrett.
A judicial torpedo they are firing at the ACA.
But she has so far defied expectations of both sides.
The expectation that Justice Barrett would be a reliable vote for the most doctrinaire originalist position has not materialized.
Brett Kavanaugh, the justice in the majority more than any other last term, is also a critical vote to watch.
We don't know what a Brett Kavanaugh, who is no longer beholden to John Roberts to get the deciding vote, will say about abortion. And we don't know the same about Justice Barrett.
Barrett and Kavanaugh broke with the Chief Justice to allow that Texas abortion law to go ahead on technical grounds, a sign John Roberts' once dominant influence may be coming to an end.
Whenever it's possible to find a narrow technical solution to a case, Chief Justice Roberts will encourage his colleagues to do it. Not all of them are on board with that.
A court at a crossroads as Americans remain on edge over just how far and how fast the Supreme Court will go.
Our thanks to Devin Dwyer for that.